Melanie laughed with her friends, the golden candlelight flickering in the crystal glasses they held. Champagne bubbles rose lazily, catching the glow of the grand chandelier overhead. The party was in full swing. Her birthday party. And she was the center of it, as always. "She's so lucky," one of her friends gushed, eyes gleaming with envy. "Daniel treats her like a queen." Melanie smirked, swirling the liquid in her glass. "Oh, he's sweet, all right," she mused, feigning fondness. Then, with a wicked glint in her eyes, she leaned in and lowered her voice. "But God, he's so boring. No passion, no excitement." The girls erupted into giggles, their expensive jewelry catching the light as they clinked glasses in agreement. I stood in the shadows, unseen, but very much present. My fingers tightened around the whiskey glass in my hand, though I kept my expression unreadable, calm, detached, patient. That was my strength, waiting. Melanie thought she was in control. She thought she was untouchable, adored by everyone in this room, immune to consequences. That was her first mistake. Her second was assuming I didn't know. I knew everything. For weeks, I had watched. I had listened. I had gathered every smug little message she'd sent to her lover, Jake, every cruel joke she'd made at my expense, every betrayal hidden behind fake affection. And tonight? Tonight, she was going to learn that the man she underestimated wasn't just a fool who would suffer in silence. No, tonight was her reckoning. I took another sip of whiskey, my eyes drifting to the massive screen set up in the corner of the ballroom. Right now, it displayed a looping montage of Melanie's childhood photos, her baby pictures, her awkward teen years, her college days. A sweet, nostalgic tribute. Her parents had even teared up watching it earlier. She thought it was the highlight of the night. But the real show hadn't started yet. Across the room, Melanie glanced my way, flashing me that perfect, practiced smile. The same smile she used to get out of trouble, to charm her way back into my good graces. But tonight, it didn't work. I simply raised my glass in a silent toast, my expression unreadable. The night pressed forward, laughter filling the space. Melanie flitted from group to group, basking in admiration. She was on top of the world, completely unaware that in mere moments the ground beneath her was about to shatter. A hush spread through the crowd as the music dimmed. Melanie's best friend took the microphone, her voice chirping excitedly. "All right, everyone, it's time for the birthday tribute. Daniel put together something really special." Melanie turned to me, her eyes wide with delighted surprise. "You did?" I smiled. "Of course, only the best for you." She squeezed my hand, giggling. "You're the sweetest." The screen flickered, and the truth began to play. The ballroom was bathed in soft golden light, the warm glow casting an elegant haze over the sea of well-dressed guests. Laughter and conversation filled the space, a symphony of indulgence and celebration. Champagne flutes clinked together, the sound of carefree delight echoing beneath the crystal chandeliers. At the center of it all, Melanie basked in the attention, her radiant smile never faltering. She thrived on admiration, on being the star of every room she entered. This was her night, and she knew it. What she didn't know was that it was also mine. As the slideshow flickered to life, Melanie turned to me with a gleeful expression, squeezing my hand. "I can't believe you did this for me," she whispered, eyes shining with excitement. I smiled at her, controlled, steady. "You deserve it." The guests gathered around, eager to witness what they assumed would be a sentimental tribute to Melanie's life. The first few images confirmed their expectations. Childhood snapshots, school memories, vacations, moments of joy. Her parents smiled, her friends cooed, and Melanie beamed, reveling in the nostalgia. But then the screen glitched. It was subtle at first, just a flicker, a brief distortion in the display. Then, the images changed. Gone were the innocent childhood photos and graduation pictures. Instead, a new set of images filled the screen, ones Melanie never expected to see tonight. A screenshot of a text message appeared in bold, unmistakable clarity. "Daniel is so clueless. He actually thinks I love him." A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. Some chuckled, assuming it was an inside joke. Others glanced at Melanie, expecting her to laugh it off. But she didn't. Her face froze, her smile stiffening as her mind scrambled to make sense of what she was seeing. Before she could react, the next message flashed on the screen. "Jake, last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Wish I was in your bed right now instead of with him." The room fell silent. Melanie's fingers clenched around her champagne flute. Her eyes darted around, searching for an explanation, for an escape. A nervous chuckle escaped her lips as she turned toward me, but I was already watching her with a quiet, unreadable expression. More messages appeared, one after another, each one worse than the last. "Daniel is so dull, like no passion, no fun, just a paycheck with legs." "Jake, I swear, if he proposes, I might actually die. Can you imagine being stuck with that forever?" Gasps echoed through the crowd. A few guests instinctively pulled out their phones, recording the spectacle unfolding before them. Whispers turned into murmurs, then into hushed exclamations of disbelief. Melanie's face drained of color. "Turn it off!" she hissed, her voice a sharp whisper. She turned toward the DJ booth, her movements frantic. "Shut it down now!" But it wasn't over. The texts faded into a series of candid photos, her and Jake, caught in stolen moments. A cozy dinner, her hand on his thigh. A blurry mirror selfie in a hotel room, lips pressed against his neck. And then, the final blow. A video clip. The screen went black for a moment, then the audio kicked in. Melanie's voice filled the speakers, playful, seductive. I can't wait to see you again. Wish I could just tell Daniel the truth, but he's so pathetic. He'd probably cry. Imagine that, grown man, crying over me. Ugh." A strangled noise escaped Melanie's throat. She turned to me, her eyes wide with something between fury and terror. "You did this," she breathed, her voice shaking. I tilted my head, meeting her gaze with an unwavering calm. "I did." Chaos erupted around us. Her friends stared, horrified. Her parents exchanged stunned glances. A few guests whispered to each other, some in pity, others in amusement. Melanie, always so in control, always the one with the upper hand, was now completely exposed. And then, as if the universe itself had decided to punish her further, a new realization dawned on her. She wasn't the only one betrayed tonight. Across the room, Jake had been standing near the bar, watching in growing horror as his face appeared on the screen alongside hers. Now, under the weight of dozens of judgmental stares, he shifted uncomfortably, his bravado crumbling. Melanie's eyes locked onto him, pleading, desperate. But Jake wasn't a man who liked confrontation. He took a step back. Then another. Then, without a word, he turned and slipped out the side door. The ultimate humiliation. The woman who thought she had two men wrapped around her finger now had neither. Melanie was alone, stranded in the wreckage of her own deception, with an audience of people she had once charmed now looking at her with nothing but disgust. I leaned in close, my voice low enough that only she could hear. "Make a wish." And with that, I set down my glass, straightened my suit, and walked away, leaving her to deal with the mess she had made. For a moment, time seemed frozen. The once lively ballroom had fallen into a stunned, breathless silence, the weight of the exposed betrayal suffocating the room like thick smoke. No one knew where to look. At Melanie, standing motionless in the middle of the disaster, her face a twisted mixture of shock and horror. At me, the man who had orchestrated her downfall with cold precision. Or at the massive screen that had, only moments ago, laid bare the truth she had fought so hard to conceal. Then the whispers began. "Did you see that?" someone murmured. "I can't believe it. She always acted like her relationship was perfect," another voice chimed in, barely concealing their schadenfreude. Melanie's birthday party, once a scene of laughter and celebration, had transformed into a living nightmare, one of her own making. The humiliation was absolute. Her hands trembled around the fragile stem of her champagne flute, and in a panicked, desperate motion, she threw it to the floor, the sharp shatter of glass breaking the silence like a gunshot. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but I remained unfazed, standing a few feet away, observing her meltdown with detached amusement. You did this," she stammered, her voice uneven, betraying the hysteria creeping in. I met her gaze, my expression calm, almost curious. "Yes." Her breath came in shallow gasps, her chest rising and falling rapidly as she struggled to process the full scope of what had just happened. Then, as though grasping for a lifeline, her eyes darted around the room, searching for Jake. But Jake was gone. I had expected it, of course. Men like Jake weren't built for confrontation. He had taken one look at the unraveling disaster, realized there was no smooth escape from this, and done what cowards always did. Run. Melanie blinked rapidly, swallowing down the raw betrayal. Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling at an alarming rate, and she had no idea how to stop it. Someone shut that thing off!" she suddenly shrieked, her voice shrill, desperate. A few of her friends hesitated, caught between their loyalty to her and their own mortified curiosity. But the damage had already been done. Even as the screen was finally unplugged, its impact lingered, burned into the minds of every single guest in the room. Her father stepped forward, his face twisted in a mixture of disappointment and anger. "Melanie, what the hell is this?" Her mother, standing beside him, looked like she was on the verge of fainting. "Tell me this isn't true," she whispered, clutching her pearl necklace as if it might somehow ground her. Melanie opened her mouth, but no words came out. There was no excuse, no charming lie that could undo what had just been revealed in excruciating, undeniable detail. She was trapped, caged by the truth, with no way out. The guests began murmuring louder now, their hushed voices swirling together into an overwhelming cacophony. "I always knew she was shady," someone muttered. "God, imagine treating your boyfriend like that," another said. "Poor Daniel," someone else whispered, though there was an undeniable hint of admiration in their voice. Melanie must have heard it too because her head snapped in my direction, her expression morphing into something dark, furious. "You set me up," she hissed. "You planned this. I tilted my head, unfazed. "You betrayed me first," I reminded her, my voice even, almost conversational. "I just made sure everyone saw the truth." Her nostrils flared, her fists clenching at her sides. "You're sick," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "You're smart," I finished for her, letting the word linger between us. "Patient? Thorough?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice just enough that only she could hear. "You always thought you were playing a game, Melanie. You never realized that I was playing one too. The only difference? I don't lose." Her lips parted as if to say something, but no words came. She was drowning, caught in the riptide of her own deception, and for once, there was no one there to save her. A slow clap echoed through the room. We both turned. It was one of her so-called best friends, Chloe, who had once laughed at Melanie's jokes about me. Now, she stood with an amused smirk, her arms crossed. "Wow, Mel," she mused. "And here I thought you were the one who always had the upper hand." Melanie flinched, as if struck. She had built her world on the foundation of admiration, on being the queen bee. But that was gone now. The power had shifted, and she knew it. Her lips trembled. "Chloe, save it!" Chloe cut her off, her amusement fading into cold indifference. "I don't think anyone here wants to hear it." The crowd murmured in agreement. People were already starting to step away, to distance themselves from her like she was a sinking ship, and they had no intention of going down with her. I exhaled slowly, the satisfaction settling deep in my bones. This was what I had waited for. Not just exposing her, but making her feel the weight of it. Ensuring that every single person she cared about knew exactly who she was. And I had done it flawlessly. Melanie's breaths came fast and shallow. For the first time in her life, she had no control. No charm to spin her way out, no lies to twist the narrative in her favor. This was reality, brutal and unforgiving. She took a step toward me, her voice trembling now. "Daniel, please." I met her gaze, the last bit of warmth gone from my expression. "Happy birthday, Melanie." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her in the wreckage of her own making. I stepped away from Melanie, from the ruined celebration, from the whispers and stares that clung to her like a suffocating veil. My pace was unhurried, measured, the very picture of a man who had already made his peace with what had transpired. Behind me, the echoes of the fallout continued. Melanie was still standing in the center of it all, frozen in the aftermath of her spectacular downfall. The disbelief in her expression was almost comical, as if she still couldn't grasp how she had gone from the adored star of the evening to a woman completely stripped of her illusions. But reality had caught up with her, and there was no escaping it now. "Daniel, wait!" Her voice cracked, a desperate plea reaching for me just as I reached the door. I paused for only a fraction of a second, just enough to let her think she might have a sliver of a chance, before I continued walking, leaving her stranded in the ruins of her own deception. The night air was crisp against my skin as I stepped outside, the cool breeze carrying away the last remnants of the party's artificial warmth. I inhaled deeply, my lungs filling with a sense of finality, of closure. This wasn't just revenge. This was something deeper, justice. A sense of satisfaction settled over me as I reached my car, but it wasn't gloating. It wasn't some hollow, momentary high. It was the kind of deep, unwavering contentment that came from knowing I had done exactly what needed to be done. Melanie had underestimated me. That was her fatal flaw. She had assumed I would be like all the others, blind, naive, too weak to ever challenge her. But she had never really known me at all. As I opened the car door, I heard the muffled commotion from inside the venue, people talking, reacting, dissecting every moment of the chaos they had just witnessed. Melanie had spent years crafting her perfect social image, surrounding herself with admirers, cultivating a reputation that she believed was untouchable. And now, she was the subject of hushed whispers, the target of wide-eyed stares, the cautionary tale of the night. I had made sure of that. Sliding into the driver's seat, I tapped my fingers against the steering wheel, my mind lingering on the way her face had crumpled when she realized Jake was gone. That was the part that had sealed it for me. She had spent so much time thinking she was the one in control, playing the perfect game of deception. Yet when she needed him most, when she reached for him in desperation, he had abandoned her without hesitation. Just like she had always assumed she could do to me. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of my lips. There was something poetic about it, really. As I turned the key in the ignition, the engine's low hum filled the silence, grounding me in the present. It was over now. Done. There was no need to linger in the past, No need to replay the betrayal over and over in my mind. I had written the final chapter, and now I could walk away without a single regret. My phone buzzed against the dashboard. I glanced at the screen, expecting another pointless message from Melanie, another desperate attempt to salvage what was left of her dignity. But it wasn't her. It was Chloe. I raised an eyebrow as I read the text. Damn, that was brutal. Drinks on me if you ever want to talk. A low chuckle escaped my lips. Chloe, Melanie's so-called best friend, had been one of the first to distance herself the moment the truth came out. It hadn't surprised me. Loyalty in their world was nothing more than a form of convenience. I typed out a short reply. I appreciate the offer, but I think I've had enough of Melanie's circle for one lifetime. A few seconds later, a new message appeared. Fair enough, but if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me. I let the phone rest on the passenger seat, shaking my head slightly. Chloe wasn't the worst of them, but I had no interest in entertaining whatever game she might be playing. Tonight wasn't about finding some rebound, some cheap distraction. Tonight was about closing a chapter. Pulling out of the parking lot, I let the city lights blur past me. For the first time in a long time, I felt weightless. Not because I had exposed Melanie, not because of the spectacle I had orchestrated, but because I was free. She had spent so much time treating me as if I were some dull, predictable constant in her life. Something she could mock, take for granted, push aside when it suited her. But I had proven, without a doubt, that I was nothing of the sort. She would remember this night for the rest of her life. Every time someone looked at her a little too long. Every time a friend she once trusted hesitated before inviting her out. Every time she found herself alone, questioning whether the people around her were laughing with her or at her. This was her legacy now. And me? I had no intention of looking back. The road stretched ahead, open and endless, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was finally moving forward. And Melanie? She would have to live in the wreckage she had created, long after I had left it all behind. The drive home was quiet. The hum of the tires against the asphalt, the only sound accompanying me. The city stretched out in every direction, its neon signs flickering, its streets alive with movement. But inside my car, there was only stillness. I rolled down the window slightly, letting the crisp night air wash over me. It carried the distant sounds of laughter, of car horns, of a world that continued spinning, unaware of the chaos that had unfolded just hours ago. But Melanie would not be able to escape it. Even now, I could imagine her still standing in that ballroom, the weight of her own downfall pressing in on her like a collapsing building. There would be no graceful exit for her tonight, no way to salvage the wreckage of her carefully crafted image. The whispers, the stares, the judgment. They would follow her long after the party ended. I exhaled slowly, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about making sure she understood that actions had consequences, that deceit had a price. She had spent so long believing she was untouchable, that she could toy with people's emotions and walk away unscathed. But tonight, she had learned the truth, and it had been brutal. As I pulled into my driveway, I sat for a moment, my hands resting on the steering wheel. A part of me expected to feel regret, to wonder if I had gone too far. But there was nothing. No doubt. No second-guessing. Just quiet satisfaction. When I stepped inside, the silence of my apartment greeted me. It was a stark contrast to the noise of the party, to the chaos I had left behind. I walked to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of whiskey. The amber liquid caught the dim light, reflecting something final, something done. I took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread through me. Then my phone buzzed again. I sighed, setting the glass down and glancing at the screen. It was Melanie. I hesitated for a brief moment before picking it up. Her message was short, frantic. "Daniel, please, just talk to me." I stared at the words, expressionless. A second message followed. You don't understand. I made a mistake. I was stupid. Please, I need you. It was almost amusing. She had spent months treating me like an afterthought, mocking me behind my back, sharing her bed with another man. And now, when she had no one left to turn to, when Jake had abandoned her, when her friends had distanced themselves, now she needed me. I let out a quiet laugh, shaking my head. I didn't need to reply. She would never get what she wanted from me again. I turned my phone over, silencing it. Melanie would have to sit with the consequences of her actions. She would have to face the loneliness, the shame, the knowledge that she had orchestrated her own ruin. And I had nothing left to say to her. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window at the city beyond. The world was still moving, still alive, still full of possibilities. I had spent too long in the shadows of someone who never truly valued me. Tonight, I had walked away. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, I would wake up to a new beginning. One where Melanie was nothing more than a lesson I had learned, a story I had closed, a name I no longer needed to remember. The night stretched on, calm and uninterrupted, and for the first time in a long while I felt free.